Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, July 8th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 54 days, the game against Michigan in 145 days. We're going to have a brief conversation about a commitment that the Buckeyes got over the weekend that you may not have heard about. And then we're going to be moving on to the bulk of today's show. We're doing that with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. And Tony, before we get into your 50 for 50 series, I do want to talk just for a moment about the commitment of linebacker Riley Pettyjohn over the weekend. This is one where Ohio State has the top class in the nation, and things have been really rolling, even on the defensive side of the ball. But they had a couple recent top targets who committed elsewhere. So this one felt like this is a particularly big commitment for the Buckeyes in 2025.
Yeah, Texas linebacker Riley Pettyjohn, top 5 linebacker by all of the 4 recruiting services. Number 1 for Rivals, number 2 for 24, or number 2 for On 3, and number 5 for the other 2. Coveted guy, obviously, and 6'2", 215, 220, can really, really move. I believe in April was timed at a 10.77, 100 meters with legal, not wind aided or anything like that. So a very fast guy who, when you watch his huddle highlights, he can pick and move between blockers and get to the ball, and he can run down the line. He can obviously blitz well. So one of the top linebackers in the nation, James Laurinaitis, now has 3 linebackers in this class, and I assume he's done at linebacker in this class and can move on to 2026 and then 2027, and Tom, even 2028.
Even 2028, whether we're ready for it or not. It is interesting to me that you look at Ohio State, they've brought in a couple really highly ranked prospects from the state of Alabama this cycle, and they get Riley Pettyjohn, who's coming out of the state of Texas, but Dorian Brew, who is in the state of Texas, but with longtime family ties to the state of Ohio, well, he's going to Oregon. And they just lost Justin Hill, defensive end out of Cincinnati. He's going to Alabama. It just feels like this is a weird cycle, and I don't know what to chalk that up to in terms of, you normally would assume, okay, the Ohio guys are all going to Ohio State, and then hey, the Texas guys, maybe they're staying home at Texas, and the Alabama guys, well, they're going back to Alabama. And it just feels like between the departure of Nick Saban and maybe NIL and maybe just other random, maybe this is just a random thing this cycle. It feels like this is a kind of a weird and unpredictable year in some ways.
Well, when you were asking, how is this happening? Why is this happening? I think a lot of people are just going to point and say NIL. Everything that bad happens for your team is NIL. Anything that good happens for another program is NIL. And I think this is circumstances and timing and position. And with Dorian Brew, there's already 2 cornerbacks committed to Ohio State, 2 very, very good cornerbacks. In fact, the top 2 corners in the nation by most metrics. So do you want to be the number 3 there? And there's also thought that maybe he isn't a corner at Ohio State. Maybe he's a safety, or maybe he's a nickel. But what he wants to do is he wants to play outside corner, and so he's going to go somewhere and do that. And to me, that would play more into it than any NIL. Even though Uncle Phil out of Oregon is going to take care of his boys, take care of his guys, and then Justin Hill said it after the fact. It's really hard to recruit a 3-4 outside linebacker when you don't play that defense. And we know they talked to him about playing the jack, and we've talked about how got to show it before people will buy into it, and they haven't, and he didn't, and goes to Alabama where they're more apt to play something of his position. So I think a lot of this is just timing in terms of missing the guys. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about 3 guys, we can, if you want to throw Trey McNutt in there as well, 3 guys that were in Ohio last year and were considered, Ohio State leans, to go perhaps 0 for 3 on those, and still currently have like the number 1 class, I think says a lot about who is in this class, which is always the more important thing as opposed to who isn't in the class.
Yeah, exactly. When you finish with the number 1 class in the country, as they potentially could this year, or even if they finish number 2 or number 3 in the class, with a pretty deep class, which could be 28, 29 players, something like that, you have to kind of squint pretty hard to see something to complain about at that point. So we will see how this class finishes out, but it does, obviously number 1 in the nation right now, and right up at the top in terms of average star ranking and all the other different metrics you want to look at. So another big addition for the Buckeyes over the weekend. Now on to Tony's 50 for 50 series. He's counting down 50 days to the Big Ten Media Days. And Tony, your 50 for 50 series now down to 15 more days now. We are almost there. 2 weeks from tonight, we will be in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. 3 days this year, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with the addition of the 4 new teams. There'll be plenty to talk about there. There's plenty to talk about in your most recent column on this. Let's start with Will Howard. And you have him projected to bring something very different to the Ohio State offense that they really have not had for the last 3 years.
Yeah, we know he can run the ball. I think he has a 1,000 or just under 1,000 career rushing yards. So every day with these 50 for 50, I throw in an Ohio State prediction. My prediction in this one is that Will Howard will have a rush of at least 37 yards. And Tom, why 37 yards seems like a very arbitrary number. It is not the 34 yards that people of the Buckeye Weekly fans would recognize. This is 37 yards, and it is because 2021, 2022, 2023, the Ohio State quarterbacks combined to rush for a grand total of 36 yards. So I am predicting in one fell swoop, maybe not his first fell swoop, but an eventual fell swoop, Will Howard will rush for 37 yards on one carry, surpassing the entire quarterback total from the past 3 years.
And it feels like you think back to Ohio State running quarterbacks in the past and some of the long runs that you've seen out of them. You know, you go back to CJ Stroud had a 50-yarder on one play against Michigan State in 2020, and he was not really a truly running quarterback. But go back to JT Barrett in the snow against Minnesota with an 89-yard run or whatever it was. You know, you have seen some long runs in that run game out of the quarterback position before. Feels like you're probably going to see them again, and just need to see one or two of them to keep the defense honest and really impact the numbers in that run game for the rest of the game, for the rest of the season. So definitely something to look forward to there. Something else, something for people potentially in Mississippi to look forward to. You think this is a year that Ole Miss makes history and makes the college football playoff? I have seen them projected, kind of close. I think I've seen one that had them in, but that's something that you feel like Lane Kiffin going to get it done this year. Why are you so bullish on the Rebels?
Well, they play nobody in the non-conference, so that's 4 free wins right there. But you look at the road games is where I immediately go because I think it's obviously much tougher to win on the road. And the road games are South Carolina, LSU, Arkansas, and Florida. They'll probably only be an underdog against LSU, and maybe Florida sneaks up and bites them. I don't think you can really have any faith in them to do anything at this point. So maybe chalk up a loss to LSU. And then at home, they have Oklahoma and Kentucky and Georgia and Mississippi State. We can assume the loss to Georgia, but you got to beat Oklahoma. Like you basically have to beat one of at LSU, home against Georgia, home against Oklahoma. And if you do that, you're probably in. I don't expect them to necessarily make the SEC championship game unless they end up beating Georgia. But there's going to be, 2 or 3 SEC teams sitting at home on the Saturday of the SEC championship game feeling pretty good about themselves. And if an SEC team has 2 losses and they're not playing in the SEC championship game, you can just go ahead and put them in and probably give them a home game in the first round.
Yeah, I think you need to win 2 of those 3 and then not have anything stupid happen, especially in the Egg Bowl. And Tony, what are the odds something stupid happens in the Egg Bowl? Only like 97% or so. So, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? We'll see there. I do think that Ole Miss probably is a team that will sneak in somewhere. I've actually seen them projected as a team that could play the Buckeyes in the second round. If the Buckeyes win the Big Ten, you could see that. I think it was a Ole Miss Ohio State Rose Bowl projection, which is both a wonderful piece of tradition in Ohio State playing in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, and also, oh boy, Ole Miss playing in the Rose Bowl. I don't know if I'm ready for that emotionally. We will see how that goes. But this is a year where you're going to see a lot of very different stuff. You got the 12-team playoff, you got the conference realignment, all that kind of stuff. So many things that are different. Something that you have to look forward to this year. You talked about it, Tony. One of our absolute favorite things, both you and me, Michigan Week. It is something that, Ohio State fans, there's a lot that is going to change this year. And, the dynamics of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry could potentially change this year with the teams potentially playing back-to-back weeks if they play in the Big Ten championship game. But still, with all the everything else in the college football world changing, it does feel like you have to enjoy that week because it only comes once a year, unless it's more than once a year now.
Yeah, well, and it may very well be, but like Michigan week is separate from the Michigan game. Even it's the build up, it's the anticipation. We know that 11th game, as soon as that game is over, boom, it's Michigan week. And when we're talking to the players after the game, it doesn't really matter what happened in that game. It's like, hey, so what do you think about Michigan? And that's when the anticipation is always there. But Michigan week, then and now it is real. And you're talking to coaches about it. You're talking to players about it. We're going up to Ann Arbor and talking to those people about it. And all the while, Twitter, message board, it's all ramping up. And there's going to be so much built up in this one, so much angst, so much desire for revenge, so many storylines, so many, make or break or natty or bust, all of these ultimatums that have some semblance of realism, but mostly not. But that week, everything is going to be real. Like every kind of outrageous thing you want to say during Michigan week is like, you're probably right. This is the biggest thing ever, so you better do it.
Well, the game against Michigan, as I told you off the top of the show, 145 days away. That means Michigan week, about 137 and a half days away, depending on what time the week before Michigan kicks off for the Buckeyes this year. But that is definitely something I always look forward to. You always look forward to. Probably a lot of the folks listening to this podcast look forward to as well. The most wonderful week of the year, and quite a bit could be on the line during that game on that Saturday after Thanksgiving. And there's going to be plenty on the line for Ohio State in all of the games that follow that as well. Potentially the Big Ten championship game, between 3 and 4 potential college football playoff games. We're going to be there for all of them, covering the team. That's Kevin, Tony, and I at Buckeye Huddle, covering the team. Mark covering recruiting, got our whole team of X's and O's gurus as well at BuckeyeHuddle.com, making you a smarter football fan. We have some new X's and O's content coming for you right now. This week, we're going to try and have Devin Radcliffe on later on in the week, as well as some other X's and O's content that is already there on the Huddle board, presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. Something that members were asking for, so we said, all right, well, it's your show. We will bring it to you there, all on the Huddle board, presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you're not a member, it'd be a great time to sign up. Shaping up to be a very memorable and exciting year of Ohio State football. Being a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com is a great way to take advantage of all of it. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.